Today we're going to assemble the steering box, or the control box I call it, to the yoke. We're going to connect this to the yoke. There's a couple things. We want to use white lithium grease here, and we're going to grease up our bolt. Put a little grease on the outside of the hole, put a little grease on the bolt, and the first thing we're going to do, we're just going to distribute that grease on the inside of the chromoly bushing that we have here. So we've got that all nice and lubed up. Okay, now this is easy to forget because I've already done it. 125 millimeter by 14 millimeter axle bolt fits in there real nice, machine bolt. And to keep that from moving around while you're installing this and maybe scratching up that yoke, we're just going to put some tape around it. And we'll butt it right up against the control box here. Just make it a little easy for you. Okay, you don't have to go overboard on this. That way it can't slide in against the yoke when we install it. Okay, now we want to orient this the right way. This is where the handlebar goes through, so you want to point that toward the rider. It would be toward the back over here. And notice this can't go on. It won't fit on here because these edges are undercut right here. And that little ridge is a safety, and it keeps this from coming off should that bolt ever come out, God forbid. But I just thought we'd tune it in as a safety device. So what we need to do, because we can't put it on this way, we're going to string it all the way through the bottom here. We're going to tip this so that is pointed toward the rider. And we're going to just slide this on. Nice little tight fit. We're going to slide this in from the front of the bike. This may be a little difficult. There's a sharp shoulder on the edge of that bolt, so it's going to take a little fishing around to get that in there. You don't want to use a hammer on this because you'll peen over part of that bushing when you're going through. You're going to need a little patience here. There we go. And you hear it hasn't come through. You'll see there's a little space in the front here. Hasn't come through the second half. There we go. Put the machine washer on. Nylock nut. Your wrench of choice will be a 1/4 inch Allen. You're a little close there because it's going to blur. It's going to go out of focus. And a 9/16 inch box wrench. And you just keep running this down till the box gets, you can feel resistance on the box. There we go. That'll break in. That'll loosen up over a very short time. So I'm just going to leave it there. And the same exact thing on the opposite side. We're going to do the same thing on the other side. And while you're doing this, I'm going to start hooking up the tie rods here. So go ahead and cut it. Okay, next we're putting the tie rods in place, and we'll want to make sure that both right-hand thread and right-hand thread oppose each other here. So the left-hand thread will be going into the control box, and we put that in the third hole, or first hole forward. And we want to put a machine washer on there because that's what helps this clear. When it's doing its thing, that machine washer helps it clear that. And a nylock nut on the other side. Double check these, double check yours. This one on this side, nylock nut, These are 5/16 by the way, 24. 2 wrenches. I'm going to just do this to one side, you get the drift. Whoops, that's a 9/16. These are 1/2 inch, right? 2 1/2 inch open end spanners. And this helps if we just get that out of the way here. Let this nut come this way, and we can give this one the torque. Make sure it's torqued in there. Okay, and we're going to continue with this side. Okay, and this goes in the center hole. Now, like that. Same procedure here. You want to be careful so you don't, the end of the corners of the spanner don't gouge the aluminum here. We're going to use the narrow of the 2 wrenches here. I'm going to keep it parallel to the front of the box so we don't mar that up. The mark of a good mechanic. Is no marks at all. We'll do all the heavy lifting on the inside here. Nice and tight. I'll provide the torque values for that. They're very standard. You can look those up on Google if you want for what a 5/16 24 is. It's very typical of what should be in there. Now, one thing I didn't mention was you want to make sure that you have the same amount of space on both sides here. We've got about a 1/4 inch before the first thread. We've got about a 1/4 inch before the first thread. That way you're going to use the full length of this. And the idea of one of these is a right hand, one of these is a left hand. The idea of that is when you spin this, it'll tighten or loosen both of these at the same time. So we're going to run it all the way up to the nuts. Same procedure for this side. We're going to, it makes it easier if you tighten the inside one first, so we're going to do that. And I'm going to use that bottom one to get that last little bit of torque out of there. All right. Same procedure here. 1, 2, 3 down. Now you've seen me in the other videos going to the top hole here and the second hole here. This is that offset plate that keeps the tie rods away from the heels of shorter riders. What I did was this, you'll see this plate is identical to this plate, but it's aluminum and a little thicker. I went back 1 hole on this, so you're actually going to be in the 3rd hole is in the same spot as the 2nd hole on the original plate here. So by bringing it down that distance, I brought this down that distance to keep the steering geometry the same on these. So steering geometry is identical to the original. I'm just going to go through the tightening sequence here. wrench away from that. Okay. And here's our adjustment. So we're going to leave these nuts loose for now on both sides. We'll true this machine up once we get it up. Just kind of test, make sure you've got full stop to stop on here. When I say stop to stop, this is the stop here, and it actually comes in contact with the yoke on the bottom here. So, all right, so you're probably to facilitate shipping on here, it'll come without the front yoke assembled to it. You want to make sure when you assemble the front yoke, it comes pre-greased. Just check it over. It wouldn't hurt to put a little bit more on there, but one of the things you want to be very cognizant of is this is one of the mating clutch surfaces right here on the top. It's built into the top bushing, and you want to wipe this really clean. In fact, a little bit of alcohol or acetone to get your grease off of there. You want to make sure it's not on any of this up here that sticks up on any part of this. So we're just going to start out with a nice clean paper towel. Just remove any traces of grease from there. And I don't want to apply acetone directly to this or alcohol because it'll melt the grease out from the inside of this top bushing. It's important that that has lubricant on it, but we're just trying to get it that. Put some acetone on the rag. Make sure you don't shoot your alcohol or acetone on that part of it. You're going to get it right in that crack all the way around. Here. And the mating surface wouldn't hurt just to hit him too on there. And this is what holds the whole operation together. Those are your clutch surfaces. Okay, that is usually plenty of clutch right there. We will have different, I think we'll have different hardnesses of rubber, maybe some rubber washers. We're still experimenting with what works best for that. And this is the lock. This is what locks that from coming loose. Not necessary to have it on there right now while you're assembling it. However, this is another nice little metric here. Okay, so what I'm finding is this jam nut on the bottom is a little bit tight. This is threaded. Okay, so I'm loosening up the jam nut on the very bottom of the yoke right here. This is for an ultimate adjustment. And then I'm pulling this down by screwing this all the way down to the bottom. Tightening the jam nut. And that is going to keep these tight right here. You should never jam down on this too hard. You're putting pressure on the bearing surface. Now, the bearing on the bottom of here is what they call an annular bearing. It's made to the ball actually touches the race on an angle, and it's actually made for the purpose that we're using it for right here. So an annular bearing, and you don't want to put too much pressure on it. What it does is just squeezes the grease out of the races. So this kind of limits you, the way that I went through this procedure here, that you can't over tighten and overstress the bearing. So what we just did was we just put a stop on this, so you can't tighten this down too hard. I'd say any other, if you wanted to clutch this a little bit harder, having a friction surface inside of here, we're using gasket material, we're using rubber, several different procedures here to try to kind of get in the right. Haven't really found it quite yet. That should get you good there. And the next thing you would do is put the front wheels on these spindles. Of course, we get rid of the tape there and slide your spindles on. So that's the procedure of putting the front yoke together.